The Ed Sullivan Theater was buzzing with anticipation. Fans lined the block outside, phones in hand, waiting to catch a glimpse of the night's headliner, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. He was slated to appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert to promote his latest charitable initiative. On paper, it looked like a typical celebrity interview, an evening of charm, applause, and sound bites. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. But what unfolded on stage would quickly become one of the most talked about moments in late-night television history. Stephen Colbert, ever the master of measured humor and insightful wit, sat behind his iconic desk as the band played. The curtains parted. Cheers erupted. Prince Harry stepped onto the stage wearing a tailored dark suit and an expression that didn't quite match the crowd's energy. Colbert greeted him with his trademark warmth. "Your Royal Highness, welcome to The Late Show. How's California treating you? Do subscribe." Harry took his seat, but didn't smile. "Well, first of all, Stephen, I prefer just Harry now," he replied curtly. "The whole Royal Highness thing is part of what I left behind. And frankly, I thought your research team would have briefed you on that." The audience's laughter faltered into a murmur. Colbert, unfazed but clearly alert, nodded. "Of course. My apologies, Harry. So, tell us about this new initiative you're working on." But Harry wasn't ready to move forward. "You know, Stephen, this is exactly the kind of thing that frustrates me about American media. You invite someone on your show, say you want to have a real conversation, but you can't even get the basic facts right. How am I supposed to trust that anything else you say tonight will be accurate?" A heavy silence fell. Colbert's brow lifted slightly, measuring the tension. "Well, I think most people would consider calling someone Your Royal Highness a sign of respect. But I hear you. Let's talk about your work with veteran mental health services." Harry cut in sharply. "That's another problem. You people always want to focus on the veterans angle because it makes for good television. But what about the broader mental health crisis? What about the systemic issues that create these problems in the first place? Are we going to have a real conversation or just hit your predetermined talking points?" The studio audience, previously buzzing with energy, was now eerily quiet. This wasn't the relatable, laid-back Harry people expected. Colbert, a pro at handling even the most unpredictable guests, leaned into the moment. "I think that's a fair point, Harry," he said. "What systemic issues do you think we should be addressing?" Harry leaned forward, his voice rising. "Oh, now you want to have the real conversation? After I had to call you out on your lazy preparation? Stephen, with all due respect, and I do mean that, you have one of the biggest platforms in American television. You could be using this time to actually educate people about the root causes of mental health struggles, the way society treats people who speak out about trauma, the way institutions protect themselves at the expense of individuals." Colbert stayed steady. "I think we are having that conversation, Harry. But I also think our audience might appreciate some context about your personal experience with these issues." That hit a nerve. "My personal experience." Harry's voice rose. "Stephen, do you have any idea what it's like to have your trauma turned into entertainment value? To have your life dissected, analyzed, and commodified by people who've never walked in your shoes?" The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Harry had published a best-selling memoir detailing much of that very trauma. Colbert, ever tactful, didn't let the contradiction slide. "Well, I have to say, you did write a best-selling memoir, and you're here tonight to promote your work. So, it's fair to say you've been willing to share your story when it serves your purposes." The audience gasped. That landed hard. Harry's face flushed. He sat back in his chair, visibly restraining himself. Excuse me? When it serves my purposes? Everything I've done, every interview, every project, has been about helping others. How dare you suggest I'm profiting from my own trauma? I didn't say that, Colbert responded, firm but even. I simply pointed out that you've chosen to make your story public. That invites discussion. Harry snapped. Chosen? You think I chose to have my mother die in a car crash while being chased by photographers? You think I chose to grow up in a system that cared more about its image than its children? You could have heard a pin drop in the studio. Colbert remained composed, but clearly aware the interview had gone off the rails. Harry, I think we all have tremendous sympathy for what you went through, and I don't think anyone would suggest you chose those circumstances. But you're here to talk about your current work. Maybe we could... Sympathy? Harry interrupted, his voice raw. I don't want sympathy. I want people to understand that growing up in that environment, surrounded by institutional gaslighting, it changes you. It makes you hypersensitive to being dismissed, misunderstood, reduced to a talking point. I understand, Colbert said, his patience showing cracks. But Harry, you're not being dismissed here. You're being given a platform. What I want, Harry said abruptly, rising from his seat, is to be treated with the same respect as any other guest. I want a real conversation, not a performance for sound bites. Chairs squeaked. The tension was now thick enough to slice. Colbert, seated calmly at his desk, gestured lightly. Harry, please, just sit. Let's take a breath. No, Harry said, his voice sharp. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Sit down, calm down, follow the script. What if I don't want to? Cameras kept rolling. The producers off stage watched with wide eyes. They were no longer running a comedy show. They were witnessing a public unraveling. Colbert stayed seated, his fingers resting lightly on the desk. Harry, I'm not trying to control any narrative. This is a talk show. We have conversations. That's what we do. But Harry wasn't listening. Or rather, he was. But only to what lay beneath the words. Work with you? He repeated bitterly. Stephen, do you have any idea how many times I've been told to work with people? Work with the palace. Work with the press. Work with the system. And every time, I played the game. I followed the script, and it nearly destroyed me. Colbert leaned forward. I'm not the palace, Harry. No, but you're part of a machine. A media machine that wants confession, but only on its own terms. You ask for truth, then label it too intense the moment it stops being convenient. Now standing, Prince Harry began to pace behind his chair. The crew struggled to keep him in frame as he moved erratically across the stage. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many of them visibly uncomfortable, others transfixed. Colbert's voice remained calm, but the tension was clear. Harry, you're on this show to talk about your work. Charitable work. Important work. That's what you said you wanted to share. I gave you this platform for that. Did you? Harry shot back. Or did you invite me here expecting the well-behaved royal expat version of me? The smiling, polished, curated version that plays well in viral clips? You don't want me, Stephen. You want content. There was a pause, a thick, heavy pause, that hung in the air longer than any laugh ever had in that studio. Colbert finally stood, meeting Harry's eye. I think you're being unfair. You've had more than enough time to speak your truth here. Nobody has interrupted you. But when I try to ask about your current work, what the audience tuned in for, you attack me. You mean when I disagree with your agenda? Harry asked. That's not an attack, Stephen. That's the point. You think this is a safe conversation, one you can control, but the moment it gets uncomfortable, you want to shift gears. Colbert's patience began to wear thin. I'm doing my job. This is a talk show, not a therapy session. Those 6 words changed the room. Harry stopped pacing. He turned slowly, as if unsure he'd heard correctly. A therapy session, he said quietly. Did you just reduce everything I've been saying to a therapy session? Colbert hesitated, clearly aware he'd struck a nerve. That's not what I meant. Harry's face was expressionless now, his voice cold. Yes, it is. That's exactly what you meant. This is what always happens. Someone tries to speak honestly about trauma, about systems that hurt people, and suddenly they're unstable, emotional, needing therapy. You've just labeled me difficult in real time, in front of your entire audience. Harry, Colbert said, trying to backpedal, that's not fair. Isn't it? Harry interrupted. When you criticize corrupt politicians on this show, does anyone tell you you need therapy? Or is it only when someone like me, someone with trauma, talks back to the system? The crowd was silent now, uncertain whether they were still watching an interview or a complete breakdown. Colbert glanced off stage. His producers gave him a wide-eyed look and a subtle nod. I think we need to take a commercial break, Colbert said, his voice low and steady. No, Harry snapped, stepping forward. We're not cutting away. This is exactly the problem. The moment things get uncomfortable, cut to commercial. Protect the institution. Silence the individual. Harry, please, Colbert said. You're making people uncomfortable. And that's the crime now, isn't it? Harry's voice echoed off the studio walls. Not lying, not gaslighting, just making people uncomfortable. A ripple moved through the audience. People shifted in their seats. A few near the front quietly got up and moved toward the exits. From the shadows near stage left, 2 security guards entered, their approach subtle but unmistakable. Harry saw them immediately. Oh, perfect, he said bitterly. Now we've got security. God forbid someone should have feelings on a talk show. Harry, Colbert said, stepping around his desk, his voice now a mix of calm and caution. Nobody's trying to silence you, but this isn't working. You're not here to yell at the audience or fight with the host. I'm here to speak, Harry said, to be heard. For once. You have been speaking, Colbert countered, for nearly 20 minutes. But you're not saying anything your audience can understand. You're just lashing out. There it was again. The subtle framing, lashing out, unstable, needing therapy. Too much. Harry turned slowly, gesturing to the security guards. Do you see this? He asked the audience. This is how systems protect themselves. You don't even have to ask for enforcement. The system just does it for you. One of the guards stepped forward. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. Come with you? Harry repeated, incredulous. What law have I broken? What rule? I'm talking. I'm having a conversation. Is that illegal now? Sir, you're disrupting the taping and making people uncomfortable, the guard said calmly. Harry turned to Colbert. Do you see this? You invited me here, said you wanted to hear what I had to say. But the moment I stopped playing the role, the moment I stopped being the charming prince, you send in security. I didn't call security, Colbert said. The producers did. You didn't have to, Harry replied. That's the point. This is what happens when someone refuses to play along. You don't need to ask the system to respond. It responds on its own, automatically. The room was still, electric. Nobody dared move. This, Harry said, looking around the studio, is why people don't speak up. Because the moment you do, this is what happens. Colbert remained quiet, weighing his next words. But before he could speak, Harry turned back to the security guards. "Let's go," he said quietly. "I've seen enough." The guards escorted him out, not forcibly, but with the weight of finality. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk. For a long beat, the cameras kept rolling. Then, finally, the screen cut to black. The Ed Sullivan Theater remained eerily quiet, even after Prince Harry was escorted off stage. The applause sign flashed, but the audience didn't respond. Some were whispering, some visibly unsettled, others simply stunned. No one had expected that. Backstage, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. Producers huddled near control monitors, talking in hushed but frantic tones. Assistants darted back and forth, fielding calls from publicists, legal teams, and networks. Studio executives were already texting damage control statements to the press. Colbert stood by his desk, motionless. He was a veteran of unscripted moments, of fiery guests and political jabs, but nothing like this. Finally, he looked toward the camera, adjusted his suit jacket, and muttered to himself, "Let's reset." The band started playing, softly, hesitantly. A stage manager called for a temporary guest segment to be prepped, but Colbert waved it off. He returned to his seat, faced the audience, and offered a weary smile. "Well," he began, "that wasn't quite the conversation we expected." There was a light chuckle from somewhere in the back row. He continued, "We invited Harry on the show tonight to talk about his new initiative. And clearly, things didn't go according to plan. It got intense, it got personal, and it definitely got uncomfortable. For all of us." The audience remained quiet, watching him navigate a moment that didn't have a playbook. "I've been doing this for a long time," Colbert said. "We've had heated debates, awkward silences, even some walk-offs. But I don't think I've ever seen a guest so clearly carrying pain and trying to wrestle with it in real time, in front of an audience." There was a beat of silence, then scattered applause. Colbert nodded and exhaled. "Let's take a moment. We'll be right back." The screen finally cut to commercial. In a dim corridor behind the stage, Prince Harry stood with his back to the wall, arms folded, jaw clenched. One of the security guards lingered a respectful distance away, unsure what else to do. A PR assistant from the show approached cautiously, holding a water bottle. "Would you like—" she began. Harry cut her off without looking up. "No." He stayed there for a long time, staring at the floor. The adrenaline had started to fade, leaving a dull ache in his chest. He could hear distant studio chatter, music cues, laughter. It was like a parallel universe, one he no longer belonged to. His team wasn't with him. They'd stayed outside the green room when he'd insisted on going in alone. "No handlers," he'd said. "Not this time." It had been a mistake. The theater had turned on him in slow motion, though not explicitly, not through boos or jeers. It was more subtle. The awkward glances, the nervous titters, the shrinking body language. The same kind of polite discomfort he had grown up recognizing in palace halls, at press conferences, during royal tours. He'd seen that look 1,000 times. It always meant, "We don't know what to do with you." While the broadcast team scrambled to revise the final cut of the episode, the internet did what it always does. It lit up. Clips had leaked. Phone footage from someone in the audience was already circulating, racking up thousands of views by the minute. Tweets ranged from stunned confusion to sharp criticism, while others hailed Harry for speaking truth to power. One trending tweet read, "Prince Harry just hijacked The Late Show and turned it into a TED Talk on trauma, gaslighting, and institutional rot." Did not have that on my 2025 bingo card. Another. Colbert tried to keep it funny. Harry tried to keep it real. Somewhere in between, the entire format of late-night TV collapsed in on itself. Producers knew the network was already in emergency PR mode. Statements were being drafted. Legal teams were reviewing footage. Harry's publicist had gone silent, always a bad sign. Colbert, meanwhile, sat in his dressing room, rewinding the interview in his head. Where had it gone wrong? Was it the memoir comment? The therapy session quip? Or had the collision course been inevitable from the moment Harry walked on stage? He reached for a notepad and started jotting lines. Maybe for his monologue tomorrow? Maybe for his own processing. Some people come to talk. Others come to testify. He underlined it. Then again, in the town car waiting outside the studio, Harry finally climbed in. The door closed. The silence was thick. His assistant sat opposite him, expression unreadable. "They're already running with headlines," she said after a moment. "CNN, BBC, The Guardian. Even TMZ has footage." Harry stared out the window, his reflection a ghost in the glass. "I told the truth," he said flatly. "I know you did," she replied gently. "But it's going to be framed like a meltdown." "Of course it is." He turned toward her. "Because that's the system. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just refused to be managed. And that's enough to get labeled unstable." A pause. "Do you regret doing it?" she asked. Harry considered. The easy answer would have been yes. It had been messy, uncomfortable, and raw. But also, it had been real. "No," he said. "Not one bit." By morning, the confrontation had been dissected across every platform, with opinion pieces, podcasts, and TikTok breakdowns arguing over who was right, who was rude, and what the entire exchange meant. Some viewed it as a case study in privilege clashing with structure. Others saw a man, clearly still grappling with deep wounds, being thrown to the lions of commercial television. Still others called it narcissism disguised as vulnerability. But one comment stood out, posted by a therapist on Instagram that went viral overnight. What we watched wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. And it was uncomfortable because breakthroughs often are. It challenged our expectations of what a polite guest or a grateful survivor should look like. And maybe that's exactly what we needed. If you like this video, then subscribe.